Hello, my Azalea players. Today's Best of the 3 Blitz Series video is dedicated to that all too familiar matchup that we see on the top tables, skirmish after skirmish, Azalea versus Levia. Now, jokes aside, a lot of players have really left Azalea in the dust because she's lacking a lot of identity after Lexi came out, because Lexi is just the better ranger right now that still pushes a lot of hit effects that can still go tall and that can still go wide. So that leaves Azalea just feeling pretty clunky out here, so you just don't see her that much anymore, which is actually okay for us as Levia players because she was a hero that could do some problematic things. I still think the matchup was always pretty favored for Levia, but what she really could threaten you with was the ability to dominate a sleep dart that she pumped pretty tall with cards like Nimblism or some new ones like Seek and Destroy, and her ability to actually search this out as well with a Memorial Ground or Knock the Death Whistle at that right moment meant that a pretty savvy Azalea player that saves their health for that critical point where a sleep dart is the win condition into you was always going to be problematic. Now, most of the time, if an Azalea just plays the tempo game back and forth, trading, shooting arrows, you're just always going to be ahead on this trade because the only arrow that's really that scary is this sleep dart. Red in the ledger, yes, can limit you to one action point, but that's fine. Levia doesn't necessarily have to go wide every turn. She has plenty of very strong go tall attacks like an Endless Maw or even a Hungering Slaughter Beast for 7. And Remorseless also punishes those go wide turns, but honestly, swinging tons of damage into Azalea is often worth that 1 or 2 life you're going to take to get your wide turn in. So really, it was all about that sleep dart. If she could get it off right in that mid to late game that just forced you to die to your own blood debt, that was the problem. Now, what you always want to do to play around sleep dart, you can't necessarily play around a tall sleep dart all the time, but ideally, you want to make sure a naked sleep dart that comes at the end of like a Ravenous Rabble turn doesn't just get you out of nowhere and lose you the game. So you want to be very smart about blocking with your Scabskins and Arcanite Skullcap to make sure that you always have the block available to shut down a naked sleep dart. If they buff it really tall mid-game and you are under threat of Blood Debt, Husk is really, really strong here, but Husk is just really strong in general in this matchup because you can force them to just lose an entire turn of damage trade because their arrows tend to not go over a Carrion Husk to just completely block out a hit effect, block out the damage they wanted to deal, and punish them for keeping a hand at all into you. So your equipment is really, really strong in this matchup. Other than that, like I mentioned, you do have really strong plays even into the red in the ledger, like with Endless Maw. You also just have such insane value that you can push through this matchup, especially when you summon cards like Blasmafet, because that is normally pretty tough for Ranger to kill. They can't really do it off of a 2-card hand because their arrows are only going to hit for around 5. So there's just a lot of things in your deck that are really going to go your way when you're versus a Ranger, especially Azalea, because she's just a little bit too clunky to do what she wants every single turn. Whereas Levia, we get in that game state, we play with our arsenal correctly, and we can just do what we want turn after turn, be the consistent deck that no one thinks we are, and win games. So let's see how the best of 3 went. And we've got a 12 to kick off this fantastic match we're about to witness, so I do win it, I do get to choose, and I will choose first. I mention this all the time about this Levia deck in particular, but ideally, I just want to get that 1 card in graveyard on turn 1, because that would mean that on my next turn playing defense, I can block with 2 and potentially just start attacking, because then I would be at 3 cards in grave, if that's what I want to do. So it's really all about getting those options open to yourself, and that's exactly what we see here with that opening hand. I am able to play a Barraging Beatdown, which will open up my ability to get 1 card in grave, and also pull some cards out of Tom's hand, hopefully ones that he wanted to keep. And the thing about Azalea is that a lot of their cards are actually red. Everything in Azalea needs to be pretty playable because she is just such a volatile deck that doesn't necessarily have to pitch that much, because at the most she's really pitching in for the arrows cost and the death dealers cost. That tends to mean that she doesn't run that many blues, only a couple of yellows, and then jams as many reds as possible. And if the opportunity is there and she gets to just play the reds out, of course, that is just a lot of high value. So you have to force those cards out. You have to make sure that you're denying the value from Azalea, because honestly, if she is unchecked, she can slam you for arrows that really go tall or perhaps turns that go wide. So really, when you force blocks out of her, she loses her ability to do the fancy things alongside her arrows. So Tom right there did come in with a knock the death whistle to go ahead and search red in the ledger. And this is one of the better ones to play early because it just slows down your opponent, slows them down to the point where hopefully their turn isn't going to be that threatening to force you down as the Azalea player and then threaten their next turn's potential. So this isn't what it is versus chain, where when you play red in the ledger and hit a chain, you hope to just make them take like an extra 8 damage to blood debt or whatever it is. That is not this kind of matchup. So Tom, he really does play Azalea a ton. He put so much time into this hero when we were all getting started into the game. So he does play the deck a lot, and he also plays Levia a lot, so he should know the correct fetches at the correct points. And I would say this is definitely the correct call here. Red in the ledger, just making sure I can't have a go wide turn out of nowhere unless I commit equipment. And if I commit the equipment early, then there goes my potential to lock a sleep dart late in the game. So Tom making the correct lines as we go. Now on my end, I just go ahead and decide to block with Reckless Swing because I'm not too worried here about covering up the entirety of that attack. Like I said, my turn is not really one that can go wide. And the fact that I have a Boneyard Marauder in Arsenal means that no matter what, I can play this hand out for at least 6 damage, no matter what I discard there. And some of the things that I could have discarded would have dealt damage, like the Soul Harvest or the Hungering. So odds were good. If I discarded the Howl from Beyond, sure, that's just going to put it in grave where I kind of want it anyway. So the Reckless was always pretty safe there. I just didn't need that entirety of a hand because I can't do multiple things anyway with that red in the ledger hit. So was able to deal some cheeky damage. With holding the Howl from Beyond, that means it is definitely going in Arsenal. It's a card that if I ever just get the extra resources to play it, it's definitely getting played. It is a +3 that recycles itself. What a great card. And this is also not Ice Lexi, right? So these expensive cards actually can get played in sequence as long as I draw the right colors. Like Howl from Beyond, for example, in the Lexi matchup can actually be a bit of a liability if you set it up in Arsenal, because when tax effects come through, like Frostbites or like Channel Lake Frigids, it takes an entire blue to play that card, and that just feels terrible. Azalea can't do that, so we are fine with it in Arsenal. Now, if we see what Tom's doing here, that is just one of the really cute interactions with Azalea that lets you reload right on your turn. So even to the point where you can put anything face down, like a Plunder Run, and immediately play it out. And just a reminder, Plunder Run is not banned in Blitz. The FabDB did say it was banned, but that's just not correct. In Blitz format, it is still around. So perhaps this is Azalea's last chance to shine. She absolutely loves that card for the interaction we just saw. So Azalea here, continuing on with her ability to try to push tall attacks. And this one is actually going to be pretty incredibly tall because it had the Plunder Run buff for 3, the Take Aim for 3, and the Seek and Destroy for 3 on a base of 4. So we're looking at 13 Dominate on this yellow hamstring shot, which is just applying all kinds of hit effects. There's the draw, there's the fact that I won't be able to set up Arsenal because of the Seek and Destroy, and the tax of the hamstring shot. So what a strange turn to see out of, I believe this is Tom's second turn. This is very tall. This is what, if it happened mid-game on a sleep dart, would probably just be game over for Levia. But we have to notice here, Tom, did take that 6 damage in full to get this kind of playoff. So that's why when a deck like Azalea is kept under pressure, they don't necessarily get to cobble together these hands in that mid-game. So on the blocks here, I really have to consider, do I want to dump my entire hand, just blocking out and losing my turn of pressure, or do I want to go ahead commit Husk? That way I actually do get a return into this play. And the Husk here, I know it's not actually preventing a hit effect, but it's just preventing a huge chunk of damage. So this kind of equalizes the swing that's going to happen. I get to stay ahead on life, 15 to 12. And since I know that Seek and Destroy is going to blow up my arsenal anyway, I'm just committing this entire hand into pure damage here. So the Howl does help in this regard. I get to turn in 2 resources into free damage. And then I'm always going to roll Scabs here as well, right? Because this is that rule. When you have the capability to play Ghostly Visit, you just roll Scabskins. And the Writhing here, it actually just would have been that perfect play if I did hit multiple action points on the Scabs, because the Writhing did cost an extra 1 from the Hamstring shot. Leaves me with that 1 floating, where a Ghostly for 4 would have just ended this turn perfectly. Who needs to set up Arsenal when you can come in now for 9 Dominate and potentially that extra 4? Now, I didn't get that extra Scabskins point, so I'm not feeling great with the amount of return damage I was able to throw at him here. But with Tom just blocking 3, he's going to take 6. And this is just telling me, as soon as I find a Blood Rush Bellows, Tom is going to fold. Because I haven't seen one yet. And Blood Rush, if I get it to play correctly on a claws attack, is a free 6 damage on a really, really wide turn, because it's adding that +2 on the claws, and that third attack. So Tom's threshold here is just really, really terrible for the damage I can present as long as I set up a bit of a strong hand. So without my ability to Arsenal there, I am just going to play off the top for probably just 1 turn until I can get something I want to in Arsenal. But with Tom's block of 3, I am expecting a pretty decent turn of pressure, and we see that it's going to be a bit of a wide one. He's coming in with that Yellow Ravenous Rabble, revealing a red, so it's only 3 damage. Going to go ahead and take it. The thresholds don't matter anymore on my end because Husk is already gone, and I have kept my other equipment pieces for when a Sleep Dart would be terrifying. So really feeling okay on the damage trade here. So once again, Tom is making the correct call. Sleep Dart is not the pressure card that he needs because it's not threatening to just end the game. And in that case, then he just gets to play a Remorseless, because the Remorseless will not only present a decent amount of damage, but also if it hits, it's going to chip me down even more. And the lower I go, the stronger that Sleep Dart becomes, because as long as it deals that chip of 1, I could potentially lose the game. So Tom still just making these correct calls. So when he does swing in with the Remorseless, I am just going to go ahead at this point, decide it is worth it to cover up the full 5, because I will be rolling Scabskins on my turn to potentially get the Ghostly off, right? So the Scabskins would be an extra damage from Remorseless. The Ghostly itself would be an extra damage from Remorseless plus whatever my main play is. So the Remorseless presenting an extra 3 is worth the cover up here, even though it's going to make my capability of blocking a Sleep Dart a bit worse. As long as I can now keep the Skull Cap up and that last block on Scabskins, that will cover up a Sleep Dart for 5 with a 3 block in hand. So this is what we see here. Like I mentioned, by blocking the Remorseless, I wanted to hit that go wide turn, but once again, I don't hit it. And funny enough, this is that same exact hand that I had last turn, basically, where it could have been a 9 Dominate followed by the Ghostly Visit, but that's just not what comes together again. Now, the more you roll Scabskins, the more the law of averages will win out. So perhaps now my next rolls will feel a bit better. But you do have to roll the dice a lot for that to actually come to fruition here. So who knows? Maybe the rolls stay pretty below ideal, but it is keeping the game still in my favor. See how you don't actually need these Scabskins rolls to stay ahead? It would have, of course, taken more cards from Tom's hand. It would have just been more damage thrown his way. It just would have been oppressive. But even without them hitting, the matchup is still so slanted for Levia because of the raw damage she can output, as long as she trades carefully on those correct arrows. So really, really good spot still on my end, even though I wasn't able to set up Arsenal. I'm in such a damage lead that on this trade pattern, this turn cycle in particular, Tom is going to have to trade down with a bunch more cards to not die, at least 2. And that's going to mean the pressure he throws back in me will be significantly weaker, and that means I can probably set up Arsenal pretty freely on the next turn. Not this turn, but probably the next turn. So I can use that knowledge to my advantage. Go ahead and just kind of decide now that I don't have to play for Arsenal here because I have that free tempo on the next turn cycle anyway. Now, he also does play that Seek and Destroy, so if this hits, then my Arsenal's gone anyway, so that just is really not the biggest deal right now, especially since I don't want to block with a ton. I mean, it's just not worth it. I always need to be able to turn off Blood Debt, right? So with blocking with one card and the Writhing in the graveyard as well, I can always instant fill with that Howl from Beyond to put me at 3 now. So I am very, very happy with that. I don't have a great return. I will have to roll Scabskins to optimally use my entire resource base here, because it will just be the Howl into the Hungering that I have in hand, into hopefully a Ghostly. Let's see if the third Scabskins roll can actually do it here. But, plans will be foiled when Tom uses Snaps to come in with that extra attack. This is where that naked Sleep Dart at the end of a turn can really mess up some players. But I was playing around it. I kept the blocks available on my equipment to then play a little bit more reactively, be able to block out a naked Sleep Dart. And now Tom is really, really behind. He no longer has his snaps. He has no arsenal, and I will still be able to return a decent threat. Always rolling Scabs here because Ghostly could hit. And it looks like I actually did get it on this time. Third roll paid off here. And the pressure is just going to be immense now for Tom, because by pitching the blue, coming with that Hungering, that is a free Ghostly follow-up as well. And I actually can't miss on the Banish here because I only have the one miss in the Blue Dread Screamer. So the correct sequence is to lead with the Ghostly, close the combat chain, and then try to hit it on the Banish with the Hungering, just so that Ghostly resets for whatever you might have next turn. So Tom going down to 1. Then I come in for 7 on this Hungering Slaughter Beast. That is an 11 damage turn off of 2 cards. Really, really above the curve. And honestly, if a Hungering turn could always hit 2 action points with the Scabskins, then who would even need to run Dread Screamers? Hungering for 7, hitting 11 on 2-card hand, man, that is nuts. So now Tom unfortunately just can't even block it out. He's got the double non-blocks in the Memorial Grounds there, which is just really unfortunate. But the game was very much going my way anyway. But that's going to be game 1, taken down by Levia. That was no Blood Rushes played, 0. And also, reminder, 3 Scabskins rolls, only one of which netted an action point, and still Levia pulled out ahead. And Tom played really well. He just succumbed to the problem that Levia has, or that Azalea has rather, when playing into the sheer amount of block that Levia has available to her in the Carrying Husk and the Skullcap and Scabs. And this is why Skullcap is always worth it in the list. Some matchups where there's hit effects, Skullcap is just so fantastic in shutting down these matchups. If you just don't have it here, the matchup's completely different. So unfortunately, it's another expensive card, and I hate to have to say that you need it, because I would always love to run Hope Merchant's Hood first. But in a matchup like this, it's always got to be Skullcap. So we saw on my turn here, I went ahead and rolled Scabs, and that was because I don't have a way to instantly burn a card in Graveyard. So I'm just digging for a bit more damage in Mandible Claws, and I did hit multiple action points. Can't use the 6, but I am going to go ahead Swing Claws. And I am fortunate there to actually have the Eye of Ophidia to go ahead and opt and dig deeper into my deck. Now, this is actually pretty interesting in that by pitching 2 cards here, arsenaling a Sink Below, and then also opting 2 cards to the bottom, I've now dug 4, 5, and then if I sink, 6 cards deeper towards a Blood Rush, which is fantastic. To really know that I've dug such a significant portion closer to such a power card in this matchup feels really good on turn 1. So even though I didn't get a card in Grave, I'm pretty happy with how that played out. And it is also kind of nice to have that Sink Below in Arsenal, because overall it will get its full block value in a matchup like this. Covering up a 4 tends to be pretty important versus either some of the yellow arrows that Tom's going to run, or perhaps even we see it on the Ravenous Rabble here, because Ravenous, unless they're running the Gorganian Tome, is going to come in for 4 at max. So overall, this is actually a really, really good return from Tom, because he did play that Take Cover when I swung with Claws. So this Ravenous Rabble was reloaded on his turn 0. So he gets a 5-card hand into me here, which is going to be, decently strong. None of the arrows he throws at me are going to be game-ending at this point, obviously. So this is most likely just free damage, free tempo that he gets to try to take away from me here by getting that 5th card in play. Now, if you really want to play around a 2 of in Blitz, sure, you don't have to attack on turn 1 in the hopes that, you don't trigger a take cover. But because I had the dig with my hand like that, and the fact that it is a 2 of, right, I'm still going to swing in. I'm going to take the risk that he just doesn't have it. And you know what? If he has it, so what? Give Azalea, throw her a bone a bit, because she needs it. So Tom now dumping his entire hand into this incredibly tall attack. He's going to come in for 11 with the plunger run, with the take aim, and then with that hamstring shot. So I do get to cover up the exact 11 here. It's basically saying, okay, I won't actually swing back into you, but I've also now taken away your potential to refill your arsenal with the plunder run, because Azalea has everything live. Everything that she draws is live for arsenal because she can at worst just cycle it out with her own ability there. So that's a pretty big denial into Tom here, and I do still get to arsenal a card, and it is a sigil, which can be interesting. Sigil's all about fixing those breakpoints for things like Husk, and in this matchup, it's not great because pretty much everything that Tom is going to throw at me, other than the Ravenous Rabbles, has a hit effect. So the Sigil, yes, it can heal some life, but it's not going to do the same as it would versus something like Kodachi's, where the health actually is a lot more important than the raw block. So Tom, now with that 1 of Nimble Strike, is actually having quite the go wide turn here because he blocked with a Nimbleism on his turn 1. So now he's got that Rabble into the Nimble Strike here. I now am a little bit concerned if he has an arrow to follow this up with Death Dealer, because this is about as wide as an Azalea can ever hope to go. And this is off the back of a turn where I decided to go ahead and block heavily and lose a lot of tempo. So from my position here, I actually really, really, really want to keep this entire hand because I have a hand that is live for Blood Rush. And even though I don't have an attack set up in Arsenal, if I can keep the 4 cards in hand, then that's the kind of play you want to have with Blood Rush if you can't have an Arsenal. You never want to play Blood Rush on a 3-card hand if you have no Arsenal, but playing it on a 4 is pretty fine. You're leaving a little bit of randomness to what you discard, because there's always going to be that 1 card you prefer to keep over the over the other 6 that would be in hand. But the other cheeky thing that I'm doing here is I'm making Tom really interested in what's going on with these life thresholds, because I'm now at 13, which would mean Husk just disappears. So since he played a Go Again card in that Nimble Strike as the last attack, I'm basically saying I'm going to Husk whatever your next attack is, or just force you to end your turn, and then Husk will banish itself anyway. So that's the mind game I'm pushing on Tom. Of course, he can also suspect that I just have Sigil, because Sigil is what's going to heal me back over 13 before it's the start of my turn to actually keep Husk alive. So by playing it out this way, Tom is incentivized to not throw anything too tall on the end of this attack because he thinks I'm just going to Husk it anyway. So he just throws out a blue Ridge Rider shot, and I actually am going to go ahead and just take it because all of this is actually enough for me to go back above 13 for the start of my turn here. So what a cheeky little turn I had where I was able to cover up Husk, play a couple mind games with Tom, and still return with a Blood Rush hand. So this is bound to be a pretty strong swing back into Tom. This is where the tempo steal is going to start going my way because Tom just doesn't have that block in his equipment suite to be able to just tank through a Blood Rush. And there's always the potential here that I catch him on some non-blocks or some 2 blocks that mean even though he's forced to block because his equipment can't do it for him, he just doesn't have efficiency behind his blocks and he just takes tons of damage. So on my end, we're going to go ahead, start. I had that blue pitch with the Blood Rush to go ahead and always guarantee that I get to lead with a claw. And Tom, sure enough, he's really not keen on blocking what he doesn't have to. So I'm going to go ahead and think about the follow up here. It's a little bit interesting because I have the potential to either follow up here after the claw with either a Hungering Slaughter Beast just for 8, and that's just raw damage, and it's not enough for lethal because I didn't actually draw enough resources to go ahead and play through Claws, and an attack. So instead, I'm actually going to go for a barraging beatdown line because I know Tom's not keen on blocking, but now I can come in with a Mandible Claw for 9 if he doesn't want to block, which is just above par damage, and I don't have to play into Blood Debt yet. So by doing this, I can force him to interact a bit, which he does then block out, but he's losing a red Sleep Dart there, which, he does have Memorial Grounds to set it back on top of his deck, but I'm still glad to see it gone, and I'm hoping that the cards he was forced to block with were not the ones he wanted to because of that little Intim that I threw in there. And of course, I'm also getting to Arsenal a card, which is going to be really important for trading back on the pattern that Azalea likes, which is to force out 2 cards to get your opponent to play off 2 cards. Now, Levia likes to do that anyway with cards like Endless Maw or Dread Screamer and Ghostly, but by having an advantage in Arsenal means that I don't have to play to the line that Tom wants me to. And overall, we just see a lot of options in my hand here. I have the blue, I have the Endless Maw. I've got a kind of awkward double Writhing Beast Hulk, but those are cards that I can either decide to hold a larger hand to play, because that way we're looking at a Dread Screamer, blue pitch into pitching a red into playing a Writhing Beast Hulk. So I could swing 12 if I want to, kind of depends what Tom's going to throw at me, or I just always have the safety net of being able to block 6 with the Writhings and then still return for 9 with the Endless. So there's a couple options open here. It's never going to be just play Writhing Beast Hulk. That is the one that sounds miserable. So with Tom throwing this hamstring shot at me, I'm going to decide to go ahead and Husk. And this is because overall, this turn, I am seeing the potential for the 12 damage swing in the Dread Screamer into Writhing Beast Hulk play, with the option for me to then Arsenal and Endless Maw. And that line looked strong enough for me that I was willing to risk losing Husk here. I mean, I'm almost at the break point anyway, but Tom, gonna go ahead, commit Snapdragons to then try to punish the fact that I used Husk on only a 4 damage attack. And this is actually where the flexibility of my hand was really strong here, because he committed an equipment piece to try to punish me for my commitment of an equipment piece, but my hand is still live for the go wide attack that he attempted there. So I'm no longer going to get that Dread Screamer swing that I thought I potentially could get for free. Instead, I'm still going to swing in for 9 on this Endless Maw, because I don't believe it can miss. I haven't seen what's in my graveyard in a while, but I believe there's only 2 misses in the Blood Debt and the Red Barraging. So looking pretty good here. Oh, okay, no, there were 3 misses with that Sigil. Oh, 4 misses with that Sink Below. Gosh, I'm terrible. I need like a constant graveyard tracker, honestly. But there we go. Still hit a 6 in there. Starting to tick up Blood Debt just a tiny bit, but returning this 9 feels really, really strong. That last turn cycle, we both committed really strong equipment pieces, but he pushed no damage and I did push 5 damage. So now in this new return here, I'm already starting off strong with a 9 off 2 cards, very much above the curve. That is so much stronger than what an Azalea could pull off 2 cards. I guess ideally, if they had Tunic counter up, then they could do something like play a Red Ravenous Rabble into Tunic for Death Dealer to load an arrow, and that would be 9. It would be 9. I mean, that would require the Tunic counter to be up, and it would require very specific cards in the Red Ravenous Rabble and a red arrow. So always cool that all you need for an Endless Maw hand is the Endless Maw itself and then any blue in your deck. So that is just a much more consistent play for 9 damage than a lot of other decks can pull together here. So Tom is going to take 5 damage on that Endless Maw. What a trade. What a trade. So I'm feeling really good about how that last turn played out. And I still have these Scabskin block up as well to protect myself from those naked red Sleep Darts that can be so pesky. So I'm feeling very, very decent about where we are in the game right now. I know my first Blood Rush was just not that strong. I really dug hard for it. I dug as much as I could in those early turns to find it, but I didn't have the right arsenal cards set up, and that was a little bit just unlucky in the sink below, finding me a Sigil. Sigil, still a great card. It did a lot for me. But, the damage would have just been insane if that was any kind of attack. So with that, we see a bit of a slower game here and more on equal footing with our equipment where it is now. We've both committed our mainstay pieces in Snapdragons and Husk. I think overall, I feel better that Snaps is gone because Snaps mid-game to all of a sudden sneak in a Sleep Dart when you didn't expect it is really what's scary. So that play is just never going to happen. It will always be telegraphed to me that Tom will be able to pull off another attack. There's no sneaky reaction step anymore for him to go ahead and squeak that in because I don't believe this build runs the Razor Reflex. So Tom, now very smart about this. Don't waste the Sleep Dart. He sees that I have the Scabskins block. And it's also a little bit early because I just only have that one Blood Debt. So he's going to go ahead, set up the Redden Ledger instead, and try to bait out the fact that when this hits, if I don't block with a piece of equipment here, then I'm just not going to make good use of this larger hand. So this is definitely a good call on Tom because he's either forcing my equipment if I want to use my hand the way it's set up, or just go ahead, take damage, and accept the fact that my large turn is just going to be stunted a little bit. So with how low he is on life, and the fact that I saw him put the red Sleep Dart on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead commit, okay, Scabskins, decent value here, because I really, really want to play a large turn. And my large turn is going to probably be the Dread Screamer into Ghostly Visit. I've got that from my Arsenal card, the Blue Pitch, and the Ghostly in hand. And that does then let me set up the Endless Maw in Arsenal. So there's definitely was the argument to just go ahead and take a bit of damage on the Redden Ledger so that I still just returned with the Endless Maw for 9, because this is only a 1 damage difference to swing the Dread Screamer plus Ghostly over the Endless Maw. But 1 damage, it matters a bit. It matters less in that I'm pitching the Reckless Swing now. So it's not like I'm trying to chase him to a very cheeky threshold or anything. It's just raw damage push. So, in hindsight, this actually, I think, was just a bit of the wrong line here. Swinging in for 9, still really strong. In theory, lethal. So it would force blocks out of Tom. And by doing it this way, I really am susceptible to the naked Sleep Dart, right? He definitely has the yellows in his list, so I can block that at least. I know he's blocked with a red, I believe, pretty early in this game. So he's got that 1 red left. So the only way he's going to get that back on top of his deck is the second knock the death whistle that he has. So I'm basically here just saying, I think I'm going to end the game before this comes back to bite me. Or if you want to play it really safe, then just go for that endless play instead. So just, deciding to press the gas just a little bit more, play just that tad more aggressive to try to end the game. And Tom just has to eat damage if he wants to have any kind of return here. And that's just Azalea's issue. So he is actually going to be able to pull off that Sleep Dart on this exact turn. As we see here on these cross wrap, he's revealing the Knock the Death Whistle, so that one of that he had left in his deck, he actually had already. So this is just going to pull that red Sleep Dart right back out of the deck. Now, the good news here is that when he decides to go for a Sleep Dart, that's probably his only attack of the turn. In fact, we know that's going to be the only attack in the turn here because he doesn't have the snaps. Didn't start his turn with the Ravenous or Nimble Strike or anything like that. So now he comes in for 5 Dominate. It's not a lot of damage. It's really that hit effect that is really, really scary. But at the same time, if I go ahead and just block this a bit, then my Blood Debt is actually not high enough for me to realistically die from it. I'd have to banish, even if I banish another 3 rather, to put myself up to 7 Blood Debt on this next turn. As long as I block this for 3 damage, I'm going to take 2. If I take 7 to Blood Debt, that still keeps me alive at 2. So I know I will definitely be taking some semblance of blood debt damage this turn. I'm hoping it won't be that full 7. I'm hoping instead that it'll maybe even stay right there at 4. But the other thing that was forced by the fact that Sleep Dart had Dominate was now I've got a larger hand than I perhaps wanted. And when you have that larger hand, that means go ahead, try to push for your damage, roll that Scab Skins. Because as long as the damage differential is 4 or more, it is worth it. And in this scenario, wow, it was definitely worth it. I was rewarded there with a 6. This is the first roll of game 2, and it is that lovely, lovely 6. And we're at a position here where that roll is just the straw that's going to break the camel's back here. Tom is not in a spot to be able to be in a healthy block state anymore because Azalea wants to block 2, play 2. And while he will be going into his turn with Tunic Counter to perhaps have even a playable hand just off of 1 card, it's nowhere near enough for him to win the game. So when this Scabskins hits on that 6, I'm just feeling amazing. We're having such a grand turn for sure. In that, I have the Hunkering Slaughter Beast already coming in for 7. I have the guaranteed Endless Maw following up as well. And this Endless Maw coming in for 9 also has the possibility now to actually banish Ghostly Visit, because I did hit the 6. I mean, hitting that 6 gives me 3 action points. Might as well actually hit the Ghostly Visit and sneak in an extra cheeky 4 damage. Now, it actually is also pushing lethal an entire extra turn early here if I do hit the Ghostly, because Endless Maw coming in for 9 with 1 card left in Tom's hand. He can block 3, he can block another 2 with equipment, blocking 5. He would take 4 and live at 1, and he knows the Reckless is at the bottom of my deck. But look at that, it actually does hit the Ghostly. So now I guaranteed get to present lethal on this turn, kinda out of nowhere. I mean, how fantastic is this? I love how Levia just cobbles these wins together sometimes. I mean, I liked how this game was looking anyway. I was pretty comfortable with the lead. Sleep Dart wasn't going to kill me, but got the win kind of out of nowhere, so that was a lot of fun.